The council chambers of Nexara Prime had stood for 4,000 years. The great dome stretched half a mile across, built from crystal that sang when light touched it. 12,000 seats rose in perfect circles around the central platform, and today every seat was filled. Representatives from 300 species watched the trial. Some had scales that shimmered like oil on water. Others had wings folded against backs made of living stone. A few were clouds of gas held together by magnetic fields, and they flickered with colors that meant emotions no human could name. At the center of it all stood a girl. Lyra Chen was 12 years old. She had black hair that her mother used to braid every morning before school. She had a small scar on her left knee from falling off her bicycle when she was 7. She liked strawberry ice cream and adventure books, and the way her father laughed at his own bad jokes. None of that mattered to the council. Heavy chains wrapped around her thin wrists. The metal was cold against her skin. She stood on a platform made of white stone, and she tried very hard not to cry. High Arbiter Vosketh looked down at her from his seat of judgment. He was ancient even by galactic standards. His species, the Vornath, lived for thousands of years, and Vosketh had ruled the council for the last 8 centuries. His body was tall and thin, covered in gray plates that looked like armor. His eyes were black pools with no whites, and when he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber like thunder in a cave. "The human child has been found guilty," Vosketh announced. "She will serve as payment for humanity's crimes against the Zithrani Empire." In the gallery reserved for minor species, Ambassador David Chen gripped the railing until his knuckles turned white. He was a small man with tired eyes and a suit that had been nice once, before he had worn it for 3 days straight while begging anyone who would listen to help his daughter. No one had listened. "Please," David called out. His voice cracked. "She's just a child. She has nothing to do with any fugitive. She was just visiting me at the embassy. Please, I'm begging you." Laughter rippled through the chamber. The sound came from the upper seats where the powerful species sat. The Zithrani delegation, with their 4 arms and faces like cracked red stone, laughed loudest of all. Ambassador Krathvex of the Zithrani Empire rose from his seat. He was massive, nearly 8 feet tall, and his voice boomed across the chamber. "The human colony on Vega 7 harbors a terrorist who killed 14 Zithrani soldiers," Krathvex declared. "We demanded his surrender. The humans refused. Now they will learn that refusal has consequences." "We don't have him," David shouted. "We've searched every human settlement. The man you're looking for isn't with us. You have no evidence." "Silence." Vosketh's voice cut through the air like a blade. "The council has voted. The matter is decided. The execution will proceed in 30 minutes. It will be broadcast across all galactic channels so that every species may witness what happens to those who defy the Concordat." David tried to run toward the platform. Guards grabbed him before he made it 3 steps. They were Thornaki, huge creatures with 6 legs and shells like beetles. They held him easily while he struggled. "She's 12 years old," David screamed. "She's my daughter. She's just a little girl." Vosketh tilted his head. The gesture might have been curiosity. It might have been contempt. "Humans have been part of the galactic community for 87 years, the High Arbiter said. "In that time, you have shown yourselves to be weak, primitive, and of little value. You have no fleet worth mentioning, no military power, no allies who would risk anything for you. You exist at our sufferance." He leaned forward and his black eyes seemed to swallow the light. "Perhaps after today, you will learn your place." The chamber erupted in cheers. Species that had never agreed on anything united in their approval. The humans were easy targets. They had no power, no strength, nothing to make anyone fear retaliation. Making an example of them cost nothing. On the platform, Lyra finally let the tears fall. She thought about her mother back on Earth, probably watching this on the news. She thought about her little brother who was only 8 and wouldn't understand why his sister wasn't coming home. She thought about all the things she would never get to do. But she didn't beg. Her father had taught her about dignity. He had told her stories about Earth's history, about all the times humans had faced impossible odds. He had told her that being brave didn't mean not being scared. It meant standing up even when you were terrified. So Lyra stood straight. She lifted her chin, and she stared at the High Arbiter with eyes that were red from crying, but refused to look away. Something flickered across Vosketh's face. It might have been surprise. He dismissed it and turned to speak with the other council leaders. In the minor species gallery, the guards had forced David to his knees. He had stopped struggling. He had stopped screaming. He just knelt there with tears streaming down his face, watching his daughter prepare to die. A woman sat down beside him. She wore the simple gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, the same as David. Her hair was silver, cut short, and her face was lined with age. A small badge on her collar identified her as Admiral Helena Vance of Earth Defense Coordination. It was a ceremonial position. Everyone knew that. Earth had no real military, just a few patrol ships to deal with pirates and a handful of orbital stations that dated back to before the first contact. Helena put a hand on David's shoulder. "Can you reach her?" Helena asked quietly. David looked at her with empty eyes. "What?" "Your daughter. Can you reach her? Can you talk to her? They gave me a communicator. For final words." David's voice was hollow. "They thought it would be entertaining. Watching me say goodbye." Helena nodded slowly. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. It looked like an ordinary communication pad, but when she pressed her thumb against the screen, it glowed with a soft blue light. "David," she said, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. I need you to contact Lyra. Tell her help is coming. Tell her to stay calm and stay alive. Can you do that?" "Help!" David laughed, and it was the worst sound Helena had ever heard. "What help? We have nothing. We are nothing. You know that better than anyone. Your entire job is pretending we have a military that doesn't exist." Helena looked at him for a long moment. Then she leaned close and whispered something in his ear. David's face went white. "That's not possible," he breathed. "I need you to trust me," Helena said. "I need you to keep your daughter alive for the next 27 minutes. Can you do that?" David stared at her. Then slowly he nodded. Helena stood up and walked toward the exit. No one paid attention to her. She was just another minor human official, beneath notice. As she walked, she spoke quietly into the blue device. "This is Vance. Authentication code Whisper 77 Alpha. The protocol is active. I repeat, the protocol is active. They took one of our children. It's time." Across the galaxy, in places that officially didn't exist, lights began to turn on. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a facility that no satellite had ever photographed and no map had ever shown, a red warning light activated for the first time in 87 years. Technicians who had trained their entire lives for this moment moved to their stations with quiet efficiency. In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, ships that looked like mining vessels began to change. Their hulls split open like flowers blooming, revealing weapon systems that shouldn't exist. On the dark side of Europa, beneath miles of ice, engines that had been cold for decades roared to life. And in a command center buried so deep in the earth that it was closer to the mantle than the surface, a wall of screens flickered on. Each screen showed a different part of the galaxy. Each screen tracked a different asset that humanity had hidden in plain sight. A young officer looked at the displays with wide eyes. "Sir," she said to the man standing beside her, "we're receiving confirmation from all sectors. The entire network is coming online. All 12,000 ships." The man nodded. He was old, with a face that had seen too much and eyes that had stopped being surprised by anything long ago. 87 years, he said quietly. 87 years of watching, waiting, praying we would never have to do this. He looked at the main screen, which showed the council chamber on Nexara Prime. He looked at the little girl in chains, standing alone against an empire. "Send the word," he said. "All ships, all stations, all personnel. We're done hiding. It's time for the galaxy to meet humanity." In the council chamber, David Chen pressed the communicator to his ear. He listened to his daughter's frightened breathing, and he said the words that Helena had told him to say. "Lyra, sweetheart, I need you to listen to me. Help is coming, real help. I need you to be brave for just a little longer. Can you do that for me?" "Daddy?" Lyra's voice was small and scared. "What's happening?" Something that should have happened a long time ago, David said. The galaxy is about to learn who we really are. Above Nexara Prime, the first ship appeared. It came out of nowhere, dropping from faster-than-light travel directly into orbit. It was massive, larger than anything the Council had ever built. Its hull was black and smooth, like a piece of night sky that had learned to fly. Then another ship appeared, and another, and another. The sky began to fill with darkness, and in the Council chamber, for the first time in 800 years, High Arbiter Vosketh felt something he had forgotten existed. Fear, being from a species that humanity had never met 5 years ago, asking to learn the most important lesson humans had ever learned themselves. "That's why we're here," she said. "That's exactly why we're here." She stood and took the girl's hand. Together they walked through the memorial garden, past the stones of heroes who had given everything for this moment, toward a building where students from a dozen species were learning the history of a galaxy that had finally begun to change. Behind them, the red sands of Mars stretched toward a horizon that no longer felt threatening. Above them, stars glittered in a sky that had once seemed full of enemies but now shimmered with possibility. Humanity had looked at the darkness between the stars and seen monsters, so they had become strong enough to face those monsters. And when the time came, they had proven that true strength was the courage to choose mercy. It wasn't the ending anyone had expected. It was better. The stars watched in silence as the galaxy began to heal. It hung in the sky above Nexara Prime like a moon that had decided to visit. Its hull was smooth and black, and it drank in the light of the system's star without giving any back. No one in the council chamber could look away from the viewing screens. Then the second ship appeared. It materialized beside the first, identical in size and shape. The space around it rippled like water disturbed by a stone, and then it was simply there, as if it had always existed. The third ship followed, then the fourth, then the fifth. High Arbiter Vosketh gripped the arms of his chair. His claws, which had not extended in combat for 300 years, slid out without his permission. "What is this?" he demanded. "Where are these ships coming from?" His advisors scrambled at their stations. Screens flickered with data that made no sense. Every sensor on Nexara Prime was screaming alerts. "We don't know," one of them stammered. "The energy signatures, they're coming from human space, but we've never detected anything like this. The readings suggest technology at least 500 years beyond current galactic standards." "That's impossible," Krathvex of the Zithrani Empire snarled. "The humans have nothing. We've monitored them for decades. They have freight ships and passenger vessels and a handful of patrol craft. Nothing more." "Respectfully, Ambassador," the advisor said, his voice shaking, "what we believed and what we're seeing are very different things." The sky continued to fill. 10 ships, 20, 50, 100. They kept coming, dropping out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Each one was a weapon of war unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Each one was proof that everything the Council knew about humanity was wrong. In the minor species gallery, David Chen watched the screens, with tears still wet on his cheeks. But something had changed in his eyes. The despair was fading, replaced by something that might have been hope. Beside him, Admiral Helena Vance spoke calmly into her communication device. "All units, maintain formation. Do not fire unless fired upon. This is a rescue operation, not an invasion. Our target is one girl. Everyone else goes home alive if they let us." The council chamber had fallen silent. 12,000 representatives from 300 species stared at the screens, watching their understanding of the universe collapse. Ambassador Krathvex was the first to recover. He slammed his fist against his chair. "This changes nothing," he bellowed. "These ships appeared from nowhere. We don't know if they're even real. They could be projections, illusions, some desperate trick by a desperate species. The Council has voted. The execution proceeds." He turned to his military attaché. "Signal our fleet. Tell them to intercept these human vessels." The attaché hesitated. His face had gone pale. "Ambassador, the Zithrani fleet in this system consists of 47 warships. The human vessels now number over 300, and more are arriving every second. Additionally what? Additionally, our ships are not responding. All communication with the fleet has been severed. We're receiving reports that the same is true for every military vessel in the system, regardless of species affiliation. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. In the Thornaki home system, admirals shouted orders that their ships couldn't hear. In the Vornath military command, technicians tried desperately to re-establish connections that had simply ceased to exist. In every corner of the Concordat, every military fleet, every defense station, every armed vessel found itself cut off from command. The humans had done something impossible. They had silenced the galaxy's military with a thought, and still the ships kept coming. 500, 1,000, 2,000. They filled the space around Nexara Prime like a second sky, darker than night and infinitely more terrible. The planet's defense platforms, the pride of the Concordat's engineering, floated among them like toys in an ocean. Helena Vance nodded to herself. "Patch me through to the main broadcast channel," she said. "It's time to introduce ourselves." Every screen in the council chamber flickered. The image of the human fleet was replaced by a face. Admiral Helena Vance was not an impressive woman by galactic standards. She was small and old and entirely unremarkable. She wore a simple uniform with no decorations except for a single patch on her shoulder, a blue circle with a white star at its center. But when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 87 years of preparation. "This is Admiral Helena Vance of the United Earth Defense Force," she said. "I am addressing the Galactic Council and all species currently observing this broadcast." She paused. Her eyes, gray and calm, seemed to look directly at each viewer. 23 minutes ago, your council sentenced a 12-year-old human child to death. Her name is Lyra Chen. Her crime was being in the wrong place while your politicians played their games. You saw our apparent weakness and decided that killing a child would be an acceptable way to demonstrate your power. Helena's voice remained steady. She did not raise it. She did not need to. You were wrong about our weakness. You were wrong about many things. For 87 years, humanity has hidden what we truly are. We watched. We waited. We hoped that the galaxy would show us something worth joining. Instead, we learned what we needed to protect ourselves against. She leaned forward slightly. Behind me are 12,000 warships. Each one is more powerful than anything your combined navies can field. Each one represents a choice that humanity made long ago. We would never again be at the mercy of those who see kindness as weakness. High Arbiter Vosiketh found his voice. "You dare threaten the Council?" He snarled at the screen. "You dare bring weapons to the seat of galactic civilization?" "I dare nothing," Helena replied calmly. "I am simply showing you what exists, what has existed for 87 years while you treated us as lesser beings. What will continue to exist long after this day is over." She glanced at something off-screen. "You have 17 minutes remaining before our original deadline. In that time, you will release Lyra Chen unharmed. You will surrender those responsible for her arrest and sentencing. You will formally apologize to the human species for this act of barbarism." "And if we refuse?" Krathvex demanded. Helena looked at him. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. It might have been pity. "Ambassador Krathvex," she said, "at this moment, a human fleet 3 times the size of yours is positioned above the Zithrani homeworld. Similar fleets hover above every world belonging to every council species. We have not fired a shot. We have not harmed anyone. But if that child dies, I want you to understand something very clearly." She paused. "We remember what we were. We remember the wars we fought among ourselves. We remember the fire we rained on our own cities, the millions we killed with weapons we should never have built. We crawled out of that darkness and swore we would never become monsters again." Her voice hardened. "But make no mistake, if you kill our child, we will show you exactly what monsters look like. Not because we want to, because you will have left us no choice." The broadcast ended. The screens returned to showing the fleet. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives screamed at each other. Some demanded immediate attack. Others begged for negotiation. A few species quietly began transmitting surrender offers, unwilling to risk everything for the pride of their neighbors. High Arbiter Vosketh sat frozen on his throne. His black eyes stared at nothing. 800 years. He had ruled for 800 years. He had crushed rebellions, absorbed empires, and bent the galaxy to his will. Never once had he felt what he felt now. The humans had been nothing, a footnote, a species barely worth remembering, and they had been hiding this. On the execution platform, Lyra Chen watched the chaos with wide eyes. The guards who had been preparing the execution equipment had stopped. They stood at their stations, looking at the screens, looking at each other, looking at the sky that had turned black with human ships. One of them, a young Thornaki, barely out of training, approached her carefully. "Human child," he said, his voice uncertain. "Your people. They built all of this? In secret?" Lyra nodded slowly. She didn't trust her voice. The guard looked at the screens again. He looked at the child in chains. Something changed in his posture. "I have a daughter," he said quietly. "She's about your age. If someone took her, if someone threatened to—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The guard reached down and unlocked the chains around Lyra's wrists. The metal fell away with a heavy clang. "Go," he said. "Find your father. I will tell them you escaped." "You'll get in trouble," Lyra whispered. The guard shrugged, a gesture that looked strange on his beetle-like body. "Maybe," he said, "but I want to be able to look at my daughter tonight. I want to be able to tell her that when it mattered, I did the right thing." Lyra hesitated for just a moment. Then she ran. She ran through the chaos of the council chamber, dodging between arguing representatives and panicked officials. She ran toward the minor species gallery, toward her father's voice calling her name. She ran as the galaxy watched and the sky filled with ships, and everything that anyone had ever believed about humanity burned away like morning fog. And in the command center of the lead warship, Admiral Helena Vance watched a sensor blip moving through the council building. She allowed herself a small smile. "The target is on the move," she reported. "Ground team, prepare for extraction. We're bringing her home." 16 minutes remained. The galaxy held its breath. Lyra ran through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The council building was a maze of crystal and stone, built for giants, and she felt smaller than she had ever felt in her life. Her legs burned, her lungs ached. But she kept running because her father was somewhere ahead, and she could hear him calling her name. Behind her, the chaos grew louder. Representatives shouted at each other in languages she couldn't understand. Guards rushed past her without a second glance, too focused on the crisis to notice one small human girl. "Lyra! Lyra, this way!" She turned a corner and saw him. David Chen stood at the entrance to the minor species gallery, his arms open wide. She crashed into him at full speed, and he caught her and held her so tight that she could barely breathe. "I've got you," he whispered into her hair. "I've got you. You're safe now." Lyra buried her face in her father's chest and finally let herself cry properly. All the fear and confusion and loneliness of the past 3 days came pouring out. Her small body shook with sobs. David held her through it all. Admiral Helena Vance approached them quietly. She knelt down until she was at eye level with Lyra. "Hello, Lyra," she said gently. "My name is Helena. I'm here to take you home." Lyra looked up at her with red, wet eyes. "You brought all those ships? For me?" Helena smiled. It was a sad smile, the kind that came from knowing too much about the universe. "We would have brought twice as many," she said. "You're one of ours, that's all that matters." "But how? Everyone said we didn't have any military. Everyone said—" "Everyone was wrong," Helena said simply. "That was the idea." She stood and touched her ear, listening to something only she could hear. "Ground team is in position," she announced. "We're extracting now. The council can sort out their mess on their own time." A shimmer appeared in the air beside them. Light bent and twisted, and then a figure stepped through from nowhere. He was a soldier, that much was clear. He wore armor that seemed to drink in light, covered in plates that shifted and rearranged themselves as he moved. His helmet was featureless, except for a single blue visor that glowed softly. He moved like water, like smoke, like something that had forgotten it was supposed to be solid. "Ambassador Chen? Miss Chen?" the soldier said. His voice was calm and professional. "I'm Sergeant Torres. Please stay close to me. We're leaving." Lyra stared at him. How did you do that? How did you just appear? Trade secret, Torres said. She could hear the smile in his voice. Ready to go home? Lyra nodded. Torres reached out and placed one hand on David's shoulder, one on Lyra's. The shimmer surrounded them again, and the world dissolved into light. When reality reassembled itself, they were standing in a room that hummed with power. Consoles lined the walls, covered in displays that showed views of space. Crew members in the same dark uniforms moved with quiet purpose. They were on a ship, one of the human ships. A window stretched across one wall, and through it Lyra could see Nexara Prime floating below them. The planet looked small from up here, harmless. Nothing like the terrifying place where she had waited to die. Welcome aboard the UES Remembrance, Torres said. We'll have you back on Earth within 6 hours. There's food and water in the next compartment, and a medical team is standing by if you need anything. David's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the floor, still holding Lyra's hand. He looked up at Torres with an expression that mixed gratitude and shock and something close to wonder. I didn't know, he said quietly. I've been a diplomat for 15 years. I had no idea any of this existed. That was the point, sir, Torres said. The fewer people who knew, the better the secret was kept. But why? Why hide all of this? Helena's voice came through the room's speakers. She had returned to the command center. Because we needed to know what kind of galaxy we were joining, she said. 87 years ago, when we made first contact, we saw how the strong treated the weak. We saw species enslaved. We saw planets stripped bare. We saw civilizations destroyed because they had resources someone else wanted. A display screen lit up, showing old footage. Ships landing on Earth. The first alien ambassadors meeting human leaders. The wonder and terror of that first meeting. We could have revealed ourselves then, Helena continued. Our technology was already decades ahead of anything the Concordat had. We could have demanded respect. Instead, we chose to watch, to learn, to understand exactly what we were dealing with. The footage changed. Now it showed construction, massive shipyards being built in secret, weapons being tested in empty corners of the solar system, soldiers training in facilities hidden beneath oceans and buried under mountains. We built in silence, Helena said. Every freighter was designed to convert into a warship. Every colony ship hid weapons beneath its hull. Every research station was really a military base. The galaxy looked at us and saw harmless primitives. We let them believe it. But why wait so long, David asked. If you had this power, why not use it? Helena was quiet for a moment. Because power without wisdom is just destruction, she finally said. We had been monsters before, Ambassador. We had burned our own world with weapons that could crack continents. Millions of our people died in wars that achieved nothing. We crawled out of that darkness, and we swore we would never become those creatures again. The display showed something new. Old images from Earth's history, cities in flames, mushroom clouds rising against gray skies, mass graves stretching to the horizon. We built this fleet hoping we would never have to use it, Helena said. We wanted to believe that the galaxy would change, that if we showed kindness, we would receive it in return. For 87 years, we hoped. The images faded. The screen returned to showing the view outside. 12,000 ships floating in perfect formation around a terrified world. Today, that hope died. They took a child and sentenced her to death for politics. They saw our kindness and called it weakness. They saw our patience and called it submission. Helena's voice hardened. So now they see what we really are. Not because we wanted this, because they left us no choice. In the council chamber below, chaos had given way to paralysis. High Arbiter Vosketh sat motionless on his throne. His advisors spoke rapidly around him, but he heard none of it. His mind was caught in a loop, replaying the same thought over and over. 87 years. They had hidden this for 87 years. He had ruled the council for 8 centuries. He had believed he understood power. He had believed he understood strength. The Vornath had conquered 100 worlds, built an empire that stretched across a quarter of the galaxy. And all along, the humans had been watching, waiting, building something that made everything the Vornath had achieved look like children playing with toys. High Arbiter, one of his advisors, dared to approach. The human fleet is requesting communication. They wish to discuss terms. Terms. The word was bitter in his mind. The council did not discuss terms. The council dictated them. What terms? Vosketh managed to say. They want... The advisor checked his datapad, as if he couldn't believe what he was reading. They want those responsible for ordering the execution to surrender themselves for trial. They want a formal apology broadcast across all galactic channels. And they want... He trailed off. They want what? They want nothing else. No territory, no resources, no trade concessions. Just accountability for what happened today. Vosketh stared at him. That's all? That's all. Ambassador Krathvex pushed his way through the crowd. His red face was twisted with fury. This is absurd, he snarled. We do not surrender to threats. We do not apologize to lesser species. The Zithrani Empire has faced worse than this. Have you? A new voice asked. Everyone turned. A display screen had activated without anyone touching it. Admiral Vance looked out at them, her gray eyes calm and cold. Your homeworld is currently surrounded by 37,000 human warships, she said. Your fleet is immobilized. Your defense platforms have been disabled. In the time it took me to say that sentence, we could have reduced your capital to ash. She leaned forward. Ambassador Krathvex, I want you to understand something. I do not make threats. I have no interest in posturing or politics. I am simply telling you what will happen if you do not comply with our requests. And if we fight back? Helena's expression didn't change. Then you die. All of you. Your species ceases to exist. And when it's over, we will rebuild and move on. And within 100 years, no one will remember that the Zithrani ever lived. She let that sink in. Or, she continued, you can give us justice for what you tried to do to our child. You can acknowledge that what happened today was wrong, and you can walk away from this with your worlds intact and a lesson learned. The screen flickered, and suddenly it showed something else. A room on the human ship. Ambassador David Chen sat on a simple chair, his daughter curled up beside him with her head on his shoulder. She had fallen asleep, exhausted from fear and relief. David stroked her hair gently, his eyes wet with tears. This is what you tried to destroy, Helena said quietly. A father and his daughter, a family. This is what you thought was acceptable collateral in your political games. The image held for a long moment. You have 9 minutes left, Helena said. Use them wisely. The screen went dark. In the silence that followed, High Arbiter Vosketh made a decision that would echo through galactic history. He rose from his throne. Clear the chamber, he said quietly. All representatives, return to your delegations. Emergency session is suspended. High Arbiter, Krathvex began. The decision is made, Vosketh said. He turned to face the Zithrani ambassador. You may have started this, but I allowed it. I wanted to make an example of the humans. I wanted to show the galaxy that the Council's word was absolute. I was willing to kill a child to prove a point. He looked at his own hands. They were shaking. I was wrong, and now we all pay the price for my arrogance. He walked toward the main communication console. His movements were slow, heavy, as if gravity had increased just for him. Open a channel to the human fleet, he said. Tell them we accept their terms, all of them. High Arbiter, you cannot, I can, and I will. Vosketh turned back to face Krathvex. Today we learned something important, Ambassador. We learned that the universe is much larger and much more dangerous than we ever imagined. We learned that our power was an illusion, and we learned that kindness is not weakness. He looked up at the ceiling, as if he could see through it to the ships waiting above. The humans chose mercy for 87 years. They could have crushed us at any time. Instead, they waited, hoping we would become better than we are. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. Today, we showed them exactly what we are. I suspect we will spend the rest of our lives regretting it. The channel opened, and the galaxy listened as the High Arbiter of the Galactic Council surrendered to a species that had been considered nothing at all. The surrender was broadcast across every channel in the galaxy. Billions of beings watched High Arbiter, Vosketh bow his ancient head, and speak words that no council leader had ever spoken before. He admitted fault. He accepted responsibility. He surrendered those who had ordered the execution, including himself, to face human justice. When it was over, the silence stretched across 100,000 worlds. On the UES Remembrance, Lyra Chen had woken up. She sat with her father in a small observation room, watching through a window as the human fleet began to reorganize. Ships that had filled the sky were now moving into new patterns, creating corridors for traffic, establishing perimeters around the planet below. Admiral Helena Vance entered the room. She looked tired. There were new lines around her eyes that hadn't been there that morning. "It's done," she said quietly. "The Council has surrendered. The individuals responsible are being transported to a secure location for trial. The crisis is over." David looked at her. "Is it? We just revealed ourselves to the galaxy. Everything changes now." "Everything was always going to change," Helena said. "Today just decided how." She sat down across from them. "May I speak with your daughter?" David hesitated, then nodded. Helena turned to Lyra. The girl looked so small, so young. It was hard to believe that she had been the center of an event that would reshape galactic civilization. "Lyra," Helena said gently, "what happened to you today was wrong. It should never have happened. I want you to know that." Lyra nodded slowly. "Why did they hate us so much?" It was a simple question with a complicated answer. Helena thought carefully before responding. "They didn't hate us," she said. "They didn't think about us at all. We were small and weak, or so they believed. To them, we weren't real. We were pieces in a game, tools to be used and discarded. They couldn't hate us because they never saw us as people worth hating." "That's worse," Lyra said quietly. "Yes, it is." The girl was silent for a moment. Then she asked another question. "What happens now? Do we become like them?" Helena blinked. "What do you mean? You have all these ships, all this power. You could make them do whatever you want. You could take over everything." Lyra's eyes were serious, too serious for someone her age. "Are we going to become the ones who hurt people? The ones who don't see others as real?" David reached for his daughter's hand, but Helena held up a finger, asking him to wait. "That," she said slowly, "is the most important question anyone has asked today. And it's the question we've been asking ourselves for 87 years. She touched a panel on the wall. A holographic display came to life, showing images from human history. "This is what we were," Helena said. The images were hard to look at. Cities burning, bodies in streets, weapons that could end civilizations being built and deployed. The worst moments of human history, preserved in terrible detail. "We did this to ourselves," Helena continued. "For thousands of years, we found new and better ways to hurt each other. We built empires on bones. We burned libraries and erased cultures. We came so close to ending our own species that some days, it seems like a miracle that we survived." The images changed. Now they showed something different. People rebuilding, hands reaching across old battle lines. Former enemies sitting down together to write new laws. "But we learned," Helena said. "Slowly, painfully. We learned that strength without compassion is just cruelty. We learned that power without wisdom is just destruction. We learned that the measure of a civilization isn't how it treats its strongest members. It's how it treats its weakest." She looked at Lyra with something like hope in her eyes. "When we met the galaxy, we had a choice. We could have shown them what we were capable of. We could have demanded respect through fear. Instead, we chose to hide, to watch, to wait. Because we wanted to know if the galaxy was worth joining. We wanted to believe that we weren't the only species that had learned these lessons." "And were they?" Lyra asked. "Worth joining?" Helena's expression turned sad. "Some of them," she said. "There are kind species out there, compassionate ones. Species that help their neighbors and protect the weak. But they're not the ones in charge. The ones in charge are the ones who saw a little girl in chains and thought it was acceptable politics." The hologram shifted again. Now it showed the human fleet, vast and dark against the stars. "So now we have another choice. The same choice we've faced all along. We can use this power to conquer. We can become the new rulers of the galaxy and do to them what they would have done to us. We can make them afraid forever." She paused. "Or we can show them another way." Lyra frowned. What other way? We can be what we wish they had been. We can protect the weak without asking for anything in return. We can offer mercy instead of vengeance. We can build something new, something better, and invite them to help us build it. But they tried to kill me, Lyra said. Her voice cracked. They were going to murder me and laugh about it. Yes, they were. Helena didn't look away from the girl's pain. And if we kill them in return, then nothing changes. The galaxy stays the way it's always been. The strong crush the weak, and everyone lives in fear. And someday, someone builds a bigger fleet and the cycle starts all over again. She reached out and took Lyra's hand. But if we choose differently, if we show them that there's another way to use power, then maybe, just maybe, we change something. Maybe we break the cycle. Maybe we create a galaxy where no child, human or otherwise, ever has to stand in chains, waiting to die for someone else's politics. Lyra was quiet for a long time. She looked at the hologram showing the fleet. She looked at her father, who was watching her with eyes full of love and worry. She looked at Admiral Vance, this old woman who controlled enough firepower to end civilizations. My grandmother used to tell me stories, Lyra finally said, about the bad times on Earth, the wars and the famines and all the terrible things people did to each other. She said the hardest part of getting better wasn't winning fights, it was learning how to stop fighting. Your grandmother was wise, Helena said. She said that anyone can destroy. It's easy to break things. But building something that lasts, something good, something worth protecting, that's hard. That takes real strength. Lyra squeezed Helena's hand. I think she was right, the girl said. I think we should try to build something, even if they don't deserve it, even if they would have killed me. Because otherwise, what's the point of all this power? Helena smiled. It was a real smile this time, warm and proud. You know, she said, I've spent my entire life preparing for this moment. Decades of planning and building and worrying about what we would do when the time came. And in the end, the answer comes from a 12-year-old girl. She stood up. I need to speak with Earth's leadership. There are decisions to be made about what happens next. But before I go, I want you to know something. She looked at Lyra with an expression that was almost maternal. What you just said, that's why we're worth saving. That's why humanity, with all our flaws and all our history, still deserves to exist. Because even after everything, we can still raise children who believe in mercy. Helena walked toward the door, then paused. Ambassador Chen, she said, your daughter is going to be famous after today. The girl who almost started a war and instead helped end one. People will want to hear her story. They'll want to use her as a symbol. David stood up, placing a protective hand on Lyra's shoulder. She's 12 years old. She's not a symbol. She's my daughter. I know, and I'll do everything in my power to protect her privacy if that's what you want. But I'm telling you now because you should prepare for what's coming. The galaxy just changed, and Lyra is at the center of it. That's not something that goes away. She left. David and Lyra sat together in silence, watching the fleet through the observation window. Ships moved like schools of fish, dark shapes against the bright backdrop of space. Dad? Lyra said quietly. Yes, sweetheart. Are you angry at them? The people who tried to hurt me? David thought about it. He thought about the terror of the past 3 days, the helplessness, the rage that had burned in his chest when he realized that no one would help him, that his daughter would die because of politics and power and all the cruelty that he had spent his career trying to navigate. Yes, he said honestly. I'm very angry. But you don't want to hurt them back? I didn't say that. He pulled her closer. Part of me wants to watch every single one of them suffer. Part of me wants them to feel what I felt, to know what it's like to be powerless while someone threatens your child. But that part of me isn't the part I want to listen to, because if I become like them, then they win. Even if I destroy them, they win. The only way to really beat them is to be better than they are. Lyra nodded slowly. Grandma would have said the same thing, she said. Yes, she would have. They sat together as the fleet repositioned and the galaxy held its breath, and somewhere far below, the leaders who had tried to make an example of humanity waited to learn their fate. The choice was made. Now came the hard part. Keeping it. 1 year had passed since the sky turned dark with human ships. The galaxy was not the same. It could never be the same. But what it had become was something that no one, not even the humans themselves, had expected. The new council chamber was smaller than the old one. It had been built on a human station orbiting Earth, a deliberate choice that reminded everyone of what had changed. The seats were arranged in a circle with no elevation. No species sat higher than any other. Lyra Chen, now 13 years old, stood at the center of that circle. She had grown in the past year, not just in height, but in something harder to measure. There was a steadiness in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a quiet confidence that came from surviving something terrible and choosing to become better because of it. Ambassador David Chen sat in the human delegation section, watching his daughter with a complicated mixture of pride and worry. She was too young for this. She had always been too young, but the galaxy wanted to hear from her, and she had wanted to speak. "Thank you for allowing me to address this assembly," Lyra said. Her voice was clear and strong. It carried to every corner of the room. "1 year ago, I stood in chains in a chamber, very different from this one. I was told that I was going to die. Not because I had done anything wrong, but because powerful people wanted to send a message. They wanted to show the galaxy that humanity was weak, that we could be hurt without consequence." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "They were wrong about many things that day, but the biggest thing they were wrong about wasn't our strength. It was what we chose to do with it." Around the chamber, representatives from 300 species listened. Some of them had been in the old council. They remembered their shame, their terror, the moment when everything they believed about the universe had collapsed. Others were new, elevated to power in the chaos that followed. They had inherited a changed galaxy and were still learning what that meant. "When our ships filled the sky above Nexara Prime," Lyra continued, "we had the power to destroy everything. We could have burned the council and everyone in it. We could have conquered every world that had looked down on us, enslaved every species that had called us primitive. We could have become exactly what they feared." She shook her head. "Instead, we chose something harder. We chose justice instead of revenge. We chose accountability instead of annihilation. We chose to show the galaxy what humanity really believes, that the measure of strength is not what you can destroy, but what you choose to protect." In the section reserved for former council leaders, High Arbiter Vosketh sat in chains. He had been tried by a mixed court of human judges and representatives from species that had suffered under council rule. He had been found guilty of ordering my execution, along with dozens of other abuses of power stretching back centuries. His sentence was not death. The humans had refused to execute anyone, even him. Instead, he would spend the rest of his very long life serving the species he had once oppressed, building homes for refugees, teaching history to children, learning slowly and painfully what it meant to help rather than harm. Some said it was too lenient. Others said it was too cruel. Vosketh himself said nothing. He simply watched the girl he had almost killed speak about the future he had almost prevented. "The past year has not been easy," Lyra said. "Change never is. Old powers have fallen. New relationships are being built. There is anger and fear and uncertainty throughout the galaxy. Many species still don't trust humans. Many humans still don't trust the galaxy." She smiled slightly. "That's okay. Trust takes time. What matters is that we're trying." She gestured, and a holographic display came to life behind her. It showed a galaxy map covered in glowing markers. "The Compact of Protected Peoples has been signed by 217 species. Under this agreement, any being, anywhere in the galaxy, can appeal for human protection if they face oppression or violence. We ask nothing in return. We gain no territory, no resources, no political power. We simply promise that no one who asks for help will be turned away." The markers on the map pulsed softly. Each one represented a request for assistance. Some were from entire planets seeking protection from aggressive neighbors. Others were from small groups, even individuals, who had nowhere else to turn. "In the past year, human ships have responded to over 4,000 appeals," Lyra said. "We have stopped wars. We have prevented genocides. We have rescued the helpless and held the powerful accountable. Not a single human weapon has been fired in anger, not one." She let that sink in. "Our critics say we're naive. They say that eventually someone will test us, and we'll have to choose between our principles and our safety. They say that power always corrupts, and sooner or later, humanity will become just like the council we replaced. Her voice hardened. They're wrong. Not because we're better than anyone else. Not because humans are special or chosen or superior. We've proven throughout our history that we're capable of terrible things. We've burned our own world and slaughtered our own people. We know exactly how easy it is to become monsters. She straightened her shoulders. But we also know how hard it is to climb back out of that darkness. We know what it costs to learn compassion. We know that the choice to be good isn't made once. It's made every single day, over and over, especially when it's hard. Especially when it would be easier to give in to anger and fear. The chamber was utterly silent. 1 year ago, when I was standing on that execution platform, I was more scared than I've ever been in my life. But I wasn't scared of dying. I was scared of what would happen next. I was scared that my death would start a war. I was scared that my people would become destroyers to avenge me. Her eyes found her father in the crowd. He was crying silently. Instead, they became protectors. They showed me, and they showed the galaxy, that there's another way to be strong. Not through conquest, not through domination, through the willingness to help those who cannot help themselves, and to show mercy to those who don't deserve it. She turned to face Vosketh directly. The ancient arbiter met her gaze with eyes that had lost their arrogance. "High Arbiter," she said, "you ordered my death. You watched while I stood in chains, and you felt nothing. You saw a little girl, and you saw a political tool, nothing more." Vosketh bowed his head. "But I'm still here," Lyra continued. "I'm alive, and I'm free, and I'm standing in a chamber where your voice has no more weight than mine. That's not because we destroyed you. It's because we gave you the chance to become something better." She looked around the room. "That's what humanity offers the galaxy. Not rule, not domination. Just the promise that we will protect the weak, hold the powerful accountable, and show mercy to those who choose to change. The choice is always yours. It always has been." She stepped back from the center of the circle. 27 minutes, she said quietly. That's how long it took for everything to change. But change isn't an event. It's a process. It continues every day, with every choice we make, every hand we extend, every chance we give to those who wronged us. Her voice rose. The galaxy turned 1 year ago, but it keeps turning, and the direction it goes from here is up to all of us, together. She walked back to the human section and sat down next to her father. David put his arm around her and held her close. The applause started slowly. A few representatives, then more, then the entire chamber. Species that had been enemies for millennia stood side by side and celebrated something new, something fragile, something worth protecting. High Arbiter Vosketh did not applaud, but he watched Lyra Chen with something in his ancient eyes that might have been respect. Or perhaps it was hope. Outside the station, the human fleet hung in the darkness. 12,000 ships, still ready, still watching. But their weapons were cold. Their purpose had changed. They were no longer instruments of war. They were guardians. And in schools across 100,000 worlds, children learned a new story. The story of a little girl who was sentenced to die, and a species that came to save her. The story of a choice made in the darkest moment, to be better than those who would destroy them. The story of how the galaxy turned, not through fire, but through mercy. 1 year later, Lyra Chen returned to Nexara Prime. She walked through the council chamber where she had once worn chains. She stood on the platform where she had waited to die. A memorial had been built there, not to her, but to all the beings who had suffered under the old council. Names carved in stone, stretching on and on, a reminder of what had been and what must never be again. Lyra placed her hand on the stone. It was cold against her palm. "I forgive you," she said softly, "all of you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve to be free of anger. Because carrying hate would only hurt me. Because my grandmother taught me that the strongest thing a person can do is let go." She turned and walked away, leaving the memorial behind. The galaxy had turned, and it would never turn back.